right. Wow, I see so many friends joining us here on Zoom this morning. This is so exciting. We are so excited to have you here. We are going to get started with our celebration of whales in 1 minute. We have 1 minute until we get started. So right now is a great time to make sure we're nice and comfortable. We're turning on our listening ears. We're waking up our brain this morning. So let's make sure we got 1 minute until we get started.
And thank you to all of those who came and rescheduled with us. Last week, we were all affected by the atmospheric river. So we're so thankful for you to be flexible and to join us on this day to celebrate World Whale Day.
All right. Wonderful, friends. It's just about time for us to start. What do you say we give ourselves a big 10-second countdown until the start of our celebration? Ready? 10, 9, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Hello and welcome everyone to our celebration of World Whale Day. Thank you so much for being here, and we are so excited that you are joining us for this celebration. We can't wait to tell you all about whales, what makes them so special and worth celebrating, some of the history of gray whales, and how we can help these amazing animals. Today, we're going to use knowledge of the past and the present of these animals to brainstorm how we can help them for the future. My name is Kat, and today I am here with the incredible Ashley and Hannah. We're three big old whale nerds that love talking about, well, you've guessed it, whales. We work for the California State Parks, and we are joining you live from 3 different parks along our coast. Today in our webinar, there's a couple of things that you should know. The first big thing that you should know is that you are able to see and hear us through our cameras and our microphones, but we're not able to see and hear you. But don't worry, there's lots of different ways that we are going to communicate with each other. One of the ways through Zoom that we are going to communicate with each other is through the reactions button. I can see that so many of you have already found it, but go ahead and find that reactions button and just click on one to make sure that you know exactly where it is. This is how you're going to let us know what you're thinking or what you're feeling through our program. All right, great job, everyone. Another way that we are going to communicate with each other today is through the Q&A box that stands for questions and answers. Today, we're going to be asking you a lot of questions, and this is where you can answer our questions. At the end of our program today, we are going to make sure to leave time for you to ask us questions. Because there are so many incredible students joining this webinar, it's going to be best if we go ahead and we save our questions and we keep our typing fingers ready until the very end. So keep those questions in your brain. Don't let them leak out of your ears, but keep those typing fingers ready for the end of our program when we can answer your questions. All right, I'm seeing lots of thumbs up coming through. It sounds like we are Zoom professionals in this webinar, and we are so excited to have you. Like I said before, my name is Kat, and today I am joining you live from absolutely beautiful MacKerricher State Park. We're way up in Northern California, and today I'm talking to you from in front of a fully articulated or put together gray whale skeleton. Hey, Ashley, where are you joining us from?
Hey, Kat. Hello, everybody. It's so great to see so many fellow whale fans on here this morning. My name's Ashley, and I am coming to you live from the beautiful Whalers Cove at Point Lobos State Natural Reserve along Central California. I'm going to pass it a little bit further down the coast to my friend Hannah. Hannah, where are you at this morning?
Hey guys, welcome. So glad you can join us. And you're joining me out in Malibu, California, where it is getting sunny, the fog is burning off, and I'm standing in Point Dume State Beach, a marine protected area, a nature preserve, and a state marine reserve. So we're going to learn all about that when we keep going.
Absolutely incredible. What a team. So excited to be here with Ashley and Hannah. And like I mentioned before, my name is Kat, and we are here with this whole cool coastal California crew to celebrate cetaceans. Now, what's a cetacean, you ask? Well, it's a whale. Absolutely. There are 91 different species of whale on our planet, but we're really going to be focusing on one specific species today, and that is the gray whale, a whale that migrates past our coast 2 times a year, a whale that has come back from the brink of extinction, this absolute blubbery beauty, and we're here to celebrate. Now, I do want to really let you know what the star of our show looks like. So give me just a second here. I really want to pull up a picture to celebrate. And so you really get to know exactly where you're virtually visiting today. All right, here we go. Wonderful friends. Here's a little bit of a map of exactly our 3 parks you're visiting. Now, I'm up here in MacKerricher State Park. And like I said before, we're celebrating the gray whale. These are incredible animals that have come back from the brink of extinction. And these amazing animals are migrating past our coast right now. In the spring, these incredible animals undertake the second half of the longest mammal migration on our planet. They're heading all the way up north to the Arctic to go back to their feeding grounds, to their food. These animals are traveling 12 to 14,000 miles. Now, in the winter, they're going to turn around and head on back down south to Baja, where they have their calves. Who's ready to see what a calf looks like? Oh, there they are. Now, this incredible 12 to 14,000 mile migration is so long and it is so tough that this animal, the gray whale, will lose 1/3 of their body weight each and every single year. It's why it's so important this spring migration, heading back on north, because they need to eat, eat, eat. They got to build up their body weight again. They really got to keep working on that blubber, that fat that keeps them nice and warm. Now, I know a lot of times 1/3 of their body weight, it doesn't sound like so much. Even if we just take a moment and we look at our finger, we can see it's already divided into thirds with our knuckles. Covering up just 1/3 of our finger doesn't seem like a lot, but for an animal as big as a gray whale, it is a seriously big deal. This is an animal that can grow to be 49 feet long. They can grow to be 90,000 pounds. Oh, yeah. So here is your math question for the day. You ready? A gray whale, fully grown, will weigh 90,000 pounds, and they'll lose 1/3 of that weight while migrating. So, how much weight do gray whales lose while migrating? Let's go ahead. We're going to give ourselves 20 seconds to try to come up with this answer. A gray whale weighs 90,000 pounds. They lose 1/3 of that weight while migrating. How much weight do gray whales lose? 20 seconds. Oh, I'm starting to see some answers come in. Great job, everyone. 5 seconds left. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I see a lot of people already have the answer. A fully grown gray whale along that long migration route, 12 to 14,000 miles every single year, they are going to lose 30,000 pounds. Oh, yeah. No wonder we really celebrate these animals. They undertake a seriously tough migration. And that's why it's so important for them to get back up north on this spring or this northern migration along our coast. They need to eat, eat, eat. But how are they eating? What are they eating? Gray whales are lovingly called, lovingly, bottom-feeding scum suckers. I know, lovingly. And it's because these animals eat in an unusual way. When they're back up north, they head on down to the ocean floor and they kind of root around a little bit. And they're going to use their mouth to scoop up big old mouthfuls of mud, sand, because in that mud and sand live their food source. Amphipods. Think tiny little sea bugs, or they're very shrimp-like or worm-like. They're going to use their tongue to push out the mud and the sand through what's called baleen. Rather than having big hard teeth in their mouth, these animals have baleen. It's made out of the same stuff as our hair and our fingernails. It's made out of keratin. And if we look close, it kind of looks a little bit like a broom. So they're going to use their tongue to push out mud and sand and keep that nice big old mouthful of amphipods. Now, I've talked a lot about how these animals are different from us, how they're undertaking this long migration, how they eat in a very different way than we do. But believe it or not, we have a lot more in common with whales than we have differences. And I can prove it really, really fast. On the count of 3, I want you to point to a mammal. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, humans. Humans and whales are both mammals, which means that we have 5 big things in common. All mammals on our planet have 5 big things in common. And today, as we are here celebrating whales, to help us remember what those big 5 things are, we have a very helpful acronym. And it is the word whale. So 5 letters, 5 big things in common. So let's start with W. First thing all mammals have in common is that we are warm-blooded. That means that we are making our body heat all by ourselves. We're making our body heat from inside our body. We are warm-blooded. H. This H stands for hair. All mammals on our planet have hair. Even whales. That's right up here above their mouth. This is called the rostrum. And they grow whiskers. Fun fact of the day. Whales have hair. A. Go ahead and take a nice deep breath for me. Air. All mammals breathe air, even mammals that live in the ocean. They're always coming up for that nice deep breath of fresh air. And L. Right now in your classroom, real quick. Raise your hand if you have ever laid an egg. I very much hope no one is raising their hand. This L doesn't stand for laying eggs. It stands for live birth. When we have our young, it is a live birth. We don't lay eggs. We don't hatch out of eggs. There are some rule breakers like the platypus and the echidna, but they're in mammal timeout. They're breaking the rules. Vast majority of mammals, live birth. And easiest question I'm going to ask you today. What do our babies eat? Or better yet, let me rephrase. What do our babies drink? It's going to be milk. So our babies eat milk. Mothers will nurse their young. So even though these animals live very differently than we do, and the skeleton looks pretty wild, we already have those big 5 things in common. We are warm-blooded. We all have hair. We breathe air. We don't lay eggs. It's going to be a live birth, and our babies eat milk. But you know what? I want to show you a little bit more of this skeleton so I can really prove to you that we have a lot more in common with whales than we have differences. So what you're going to see right now is my camera is going to jiggle a little bit, and it's just because I'm removing it from the stand. I'm going to turn this around and let's go exploring. So we already have, let's see, we all have mouths, and we learned that whales have different teeth than we do. Or these particular kind of whales have what's called baleen, nice long hanging teeth. We don't see them on the skeleton because they're made out of keratin, the same thing as our fingernails and our hair. So we've got that in common. Now we have eyes, just like a gray whale. And on this skeleton, right here is where we'll find the eye of a gray whale. And if we move down a little bit farther, we see a lot of bones that I bet we already recognize. We see this nice, beautiful, long spine to help keep their bodies strong, and we have that too. We might be noticing lots of bumps along the top of that spine, but we have those bumps too. If you put your hand on your back and you really push on that spine a little bit, you're going to start feeling some bumps. This is just the sized up version. This is the whale sized version. Looking down, we can see ribs that help to protect their heart, their lungs, those internal organs. But if I haven't convinced you yet that we have more in common with these animals than differences, I want you to take a look at their flipper. Do these bones look familiar? Yeah, these bones look just like the bones we have in our own human hands. Whales just use them for a very different purpose. They use them to help support that front flipper. So we can see we've got a lot in common with these animals. All right, I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to flip my camera. Whoa, we're still moving. Friends, now we've learned a little bit about what makes us similar and what makes us different. But we've also mentioned about how these animals have had, or they have a lot of fat to help keep them warm, that blubber, because we know that all mammals are warm-blooded. And we've learned about that baleen, and that blubber and that baleen is what has made whales valuable to us humans for time immemorial. We're happy to say now that these animals are protected along our coast, along their migration, that 17 to 21,000 mile migration, or I'm sorry, that 12 to 14,000 mile migration. And we're happy to say that these animals are protected and their population is now up to 17 to 21,000 whales. Oh yeah, just the Eastern Pacific gray whale. However, this wasn't always the case because that baleen and blubber, unfortunately, was very, very profitable. in commercial whaling. But the history of these animals is incredibly important to understand as we continue to find ways to protect the future of these special creatures. So now I'm going to go ahead and I am going to pass the whale over to Ashley down in Point Lobos so she can tell us a little bit more about the history of commercial whaling along the California coast.
Awesome. It looks like that whale has made record time getting from all the way from Northern California here to Central California. Hello again, everybody. My name is Ashley, and I am here at Point Lobos State Natural Reserve. And you might have noticed that my background has changed. I have traveled from right along the shoreline to just across the road into what has been called the boneyard. So let me go ahead, flip my camera around, give you a quick look around here, because as Kat was just mentioning, we got to look at the bones in the skeleton up at MacKerricher. We also have our own bones here. And if I move us a little bit closer, I want to show off this big piece of baleen that we have hanging on this wall right here. Again, that's how these whales are getting their food. And here at Point Lobos, there has been this long history of whaling. And to understand commercial whaling along the coast of California, we have to travel back in time all the way to 1854. And let me go ahead and pull up a photo here to introduce you to the gentleman who really started commercial whaling. This is Captain John Davenport, and maybe you recognize that last name, Davenport. It is now the name of a city just north of Santa Cruz. And he was the one that really started commercial whaling along the coast of California. And a whaling station was created right here at Point Lobos. And this whaling station began in 1862. Portuguese whalers traveled all the way from the Azores Islands all the way here to Point Lobos. And when this whaling was happened, this area looked really different. And so to give you a better idea of what it might have looked like, let me go ahead and pull up another photo for us all here. Let's see. Give me one moment to find it. Here we go. Let me go ahead and share that. And I want you to take a moment to make some observations. What do you notice about what is going on in this photo? Feel free to share with the person sitting next to you or those around you. Or if you have a piece of paper handy, you can jot down a few notes. But what do you notice about what's going on in this photo? Some of the things that I notice is that there are a lot fewer trees. And there is a whale that has been pulled up onto land. We have several different types of boats. We have this little small one right here in the cove, as well as this larger one in the background. And also, if we look at what's going on in this upper left-hand corner of this photo, we see a flag. And there would be somebody standing on top of this hillside, and they would be on the lookout for whales that were passing by. And when a whale was spotted, they would raise that flag as a signal to the whalers that would be in this smaller boat that's in the water that there was a whale in the area. And then this small boat would go after that whale. And then if they were successful, they would tow the whale back to shore. And you might be wondering, what were they using the whales for? Like Kat mentioned, these whales have that thick layer of blubber that they use to stay warm. And once that blubber was removed from the whale, they would put that blubber in large pots. And I'm going to move my camera here real quick to show you what these pots look like. So let me go ahead, pull the phone off here real quick, and go ahead and flip it around here. And we have these big pots right here. And these are called tripots because that is the name of the process of melting down the blubber into oil. And that oil was used to power things like lanterns, as well as also act as a lubricant for different types of machinery. And then these whales were worth quite a bit of money. So if we think about a gallon of milk, 1 gallon of whale oil was worth about, let's see, got to check my notes here to make sure. It was worth about $36 in today's money. And then if we think about an entire whale would be worth about $52,000. But all this whaling continued to happen, and it eventually reached the point where other forms of energy were developed and found, like kerosene, for example. And so the demand for whale oil increased. But also, the amount of the number of whales that were out in the ocean also significantly decreased. And it was thought at one point that these gray whales were nearing extinction. But fortunately, these whales started to become protected. And here at Point Lobos, these whales are protected in a few different ways. The first one is by something called a marine protected area, or an MPA for short. And I'm curious, when you hear the word marine, what are some of the first things that come to mind? What do you think about when you hear the word marine? Probably thinking about the water, the many different types of animals that live out in the ocean, maybe even continuing to think about how people use the ocean. So like people using submarines, or marine biologists, people that, scientists that study ocean life. And so we have one of these protected areas here at Point Lobos. And to help us think about exactly what it means to be an MPA, I have a little shell right here. And we want to be able to keep this shell safe. And so I'm going to put it in my little box right here. I'm going to put the lid on it. And now this shell is protected from things like fishing, as well as from visitors coming to Point Lobos, picking up this shell, sticking it in their pocket, and bringing it home with them. And then the protection don't just end there. We also have a larger type of marine protected area, something called a national marine sanctuary. This is going to be my bigger box right here. So I'm going to put my little small box into this bigger box. I'm going to put another lid on here. If I can get it on. There we go. And now we have 2 layers of protection. And this larger marine sanctuary is protecting the waters from things like oil drilling, as well as underwater mining. And as gray whales are making their thousands of miles long migration, they're passing right by Point Lobos through these protected waters. And today, in the United States, whaling is no longer allowed, thanks to something called the Marine Mammal Protection Act. And because of all these protections that were put into place, we are starting to see a greater number of whales. And even if we get really lucky, sometimes we have even seen gray whales returning into Whalers Cove. And so I'm going to ask my friend behind the scenes to pull up a photo that one of my other friends caught of a whale swimming in Whalers Cove. And this is just such an incredible sighting and a sign of what can happen when we protect these animals. And so throughout the years, we have gone from the commercial whaling to protecting them, from scientists continuing to learn more about them, people going whale watching to gain a greater appreciation. And my friend Hannah down south knows even more about this human connection to these whales. And so I hope Hannah's ready, because I'm going to pass the little whale down the coast to Hannah.
Hey guys! And he has arrived! Welcome! Well, thank you, Ashley, for walking us through this reflection on how whales have become protected in our modern day. Now we're going to reflect even more. We're going to look back even further, because whales haven't just been around for a few hundred years. They've been around for thousands of years, just like our indigenous cultures in California. All along California, there are many, many native tribes. And I'm going to focus on one today at Point Dume State Beach. We're going to focus on the Chumash. So I'm going to pull up my slides. Oops. So before we get started, I'm going to be acknowledging this tribe. Bear with me. All right, so some of these words you might not be able to understand, but they are still culturally significant. We recognize and acknowledge the first people of this ancestral and unseceded territory of the community of Sumo, meaning abundance, on the traditional homelands of the Mitzguaracan Chumash people that is now occupied in part by Point Dume State Beach. As guest stewards of this land, we respectfully honor the ancestors and their descendants who are still here and are members of the Babaraño Venturaño Band of Mission Indians. So there is one word that I want you guys to focus on, and that is Sumo. Sumo is the ancestral village that resided at Point Dume. You can see that in 1947, there was no residential housing there yet, and this is what it would have looked like a long time ago. Point Dume gets a full arc of the sun. So we get to see the sun rising in the east, arcing over Point Dume, and setting in the west. And this created a location for the Chumash to gather together and celebrate the sun. They would have ceremony, music, and dancing where they would come together. But not only this, they would explore the Santa Monica Bay, collecting resources and food in order to survive. And over time, they noticed and realized that whales migrated through this area every year. and they created a relationship with these whales. They understood that they were a symbol of a healthy ocean. If whales were close to the shoreline, that means it was warm water, that there was lots of nutrients, and that these whales felt safe enough to get close. But sometimes there were moments when whales would pass on, and they would come onto the shoreline. And this is called a stranding. But the Chumash, the native people, believed that this was a great blessing, that this was an opportunity to preserve the memory and the spirit of this animal and preserve it for many generations. So you can see here, I have a photo of a traditional home called an op. This op is made of big willow branches and tule reeds that can be found in creek beds. The willow branches are nice and flexible, helping them create the structure of the home. And they had big tule reeds that they would layer over the structure that would make the home dry and waterproof. But you know what? I'm sure you also see these huge bones. We have big rib bones here from the whale's ribs that they would actually use as extra support in the home. If they could render the blubber from the body of the whale, the fat, they would use this to seal the hides that they would collect and hunt and make them into clothing. They would also eat the meat if they could. And I see right now Kat pulling up my next thing I'm going to talk about. She is carrying a big whale vertebrae. So go ahead, if you can pull her up. You can see here this big vertebrae. And I want to explain to you what the Chumash did. So this big vertebrae was actually used as furniture. Can you believe it? They used everything they could to resource from the animal. They would use these as stools in their home, and they would decorate them with a mixture called yop, which was tar and pine sap. So they could stick abalone shells, they could stick little shell beads, similar to this guy right here, this big, beautiful red abalone. We can see that there's a dark mixture covering the holes here, the filter holes, and you can even see super tiny shell beads. And this is just an example of how they would preserve the memory and the spirit of these animals and understand that they needed to preserve and conserve everything that they could. Thanks, Kat, for representing the stool. But we live in a changing world. Whales are experiencing all kinds of changes in their migration. And it's important to understand how they're combating climate change. And one way that they're combating this long migration is actually with a special thing that they do, a natural carbon cycle. So when they're traveling on this long migration, they're picking up on seasonal cues. In the ocean currents of the ocean, there is warm and cold water that circulate, creating the natural currents that move through the ocean. And they're affected by the seasons. So if we have global warming and the earth and the ocean are heating up, that means that these currents are slowing down. And that happens to affect these whales. This means that they miss those seasonal cues when it changes season into the colder times. And if they miss this, they might not be able to make it to the feeding opportunities to build up their blubber and get nice and big, ready for their next part of the journey. They also might miss out on breeding opportunities, which means they will miss out on a bunch of other whales to meet. And that is not good. But one way that they are combating climate change is actually with oil. I'm not going to give it away yet, but let's use our binoculars. Let's look at these photos. These are taken a few seconds apart at Point Dume of some amazing whales migrating. And you can see that, I want you to observe. So maybe we're seeing the ocean. It has a lot of movement. Maybe it was really windy that day, the current. We see two big whales out in the ocean. We see their big flukes. We see a big blow. We're seeing interesting things, but What I really want you to look for is something in the water, something with the whales, something kind of mucky, something kind of, cloudy. Do I see thumbs up? Do you guys see it? Because I just made all of you stare at a photo of whale poop. I know! I got you. This super rare footage is of whales pooping. But this is super important to how they combat climate change. Whales are amazing, and they do a natural carbon cycle of just moving through the ocean. At the surface of the ocean, it's nice warm water. And when they dive, shutting down their digestive system, they're moving this warm water down to the sea floor and pulling it up to the surface, moving the cold up. This is a natural way of them swimming, and this is called the whale pump. So they're pumping the water and circulating the different levels. But while they're doing that, they are accumulating all this nutrients through feeding, through those little crustaceans that Kat talked about. And this makes their poop practically fertilizer for teeny tiny microscopic plants at the surface of the water. This phytoplankton is algae, and it absorbs sunlight and CO2, what we breathe out. And it creates oxygen. So every time we breathe, every other breath you take comes from whale poop. Crazy. And not only that, whales are experienced farmers. They're able to fertilize that plankton, that phytoplankton, and their own food eats it. So the phytoplankton is eaten by krill, it's eaten by small pelagic fish like sardines and anchovies. So whales are amazing, and we are accumulating more and more whales in the ocean. But we need a lot more in order to combat climate change. So, you know what? I'm going to pass the whale to you. And I want to know in the Q&A, tell us how you are helping the environment. How are you helping the ocean? And how are you helping with whale migration? So I'm going to take a look. I have no questions. What are some things that you are doing for the ocean? Or what are some questions that you have for us now that we've come to the conclusion of our amazing, amazing Portscast? No questions are popping in. I'm going to look at some of the answers. Whales do have hair. Do people kill and eat whales? Well, they used to. It looks like we got a lot of these answered. Oh, no questions. Okay. All right, my friends. Well, there's some things that you can do for the environment. You guys can always recycle. Recycle everything you can. And pro tip, rinse it out because then it will definitely be recycled. And reuse. We want to reduce our use of plastic. So reuse your water bottles, reuse your bags and containers. Reduce your use of plastic in your intake because we don't need it. We got cool bags. And you know what? Plant native plants and pick up trash, my friends. We are in our wet season. We are seeing lots of rain sweep out our trash out into the ocean. So if you see it, be kind and brave and pick it up because you might save some awesome species out there like the amazing whales we talked about today. All right, we got one last minute. I'm going to check. Does the poop go on the sand? It goes everywhere in the ocean. All right, Ashley, do you want to answer any questions?
Let me take a look at what we have here. Ooh, there's a great question about, are there any whale watching or volunteer opportunities with whale conservation area or conservation efforts. And I believe there are, like, especially here in the Monterey Bay area, there are definitely paid jobs related to like whale watching, boats where you could be a naturalist. And so you could go out on these whale watching boats with fellow whale lovers and educate them about what they are seeing. There are also folks that work with whale entanglement networks. And so they keep track of if any whales are trapped in, say, fishing line and help care for those whales. And so I encourage you to check around in your local areas to see if there are any opportunities available. Let's see, Kat, are there any questions that you would like to answer?
Thank you so much, Ashley. I saw a question a bit ago asking me if these whale bones are real. And the answer is yes. This is an articulated or put together gray whale skeleton of a whale that washed up in MacKerricher State Park in the 1980s. So these are real whale bones. At that time, the whale was already deceased. And so there wasn't anything that us humans could do in order to save that whale. But being able to have these whale bones is a great way for us to continue teaching more people. Because as we're talking about ways to help whales, you all have actually already participated in an amazing way to help whales. And that is learning and talking about this absolutely incredible animal that we get to share this amazing blue and green planet with. Oh, for Ashley and Hannah, do we have any last comments before we say goodbye to our wonderful whale celebrating friends?
Thank you guys so much for joining us. We really appreciate you, and we hope that you continue to be stewards for our wonderful environment. From all of us at the California State Parks, guys, have a good one.